Okay, good morning, everybody, and special welcome to the officials from the Auditor General's Department, from the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, from the Chaguanas Borough Corporation, and of course we want to welcome as well members of the media who are here and members of the general public who might be sitting in. My name is Boindra Dutt Tiwari. I'm chair of this committee, and other members will say their names and introduce themselves to you. The purpose of this meeting of the Public Accounts Committee is to examine the report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the financial statements of the Chaguanas Borough Corporation for the years 2008 to 2011. The committee is desirous of hearing the challenges being faced by the key stakeholders at the Chaguanas Borough Corporation in an attempt to determine some of the possible solutions to these challenges. The role of the committee is to help the CBC to improve its delivery of services in an efficient, effective, and economic manner. This meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast live on the Parliament's channel, on television channel 11, and on radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Viewers and listeners tuning in can send their comments related to today's topic by email to parl101@ttparliament.org, parl101@ttparliament.org, and at facebook.com/ttparliament. So we proceed now with today's meeting. Viewers can also communicate by Twitter at @ttparliament. And I will ask, first of all, members of the Auditor General's Department to introduce themselves. Then we'll go to the Mayor of the Chaguanas Borough Corporation to make a brief opening statement. And I will also invite my colleagues sitting here to introduce themselves before the Mayor makes his statement. Okay, so members of the Auditor General's Department.
Good morning, all. I'm Louis Hernandez, Audit Director. Well, not Assistant Auditor General at this moment, although I act most of the time, I act Assistant Auditor General during the year.
Good morning. I am Simone Wajadali, Assistant Audit Director.
Good morning, all. Taharko Bika, Vice Chair.
Morning, Melissa Ramkisoon, Member.
Morning, Adrian Leons, Member.
Morning, Lester Henry, Member.
I wonder, Mr. Mayor, if you can give a brief opening statement on behalf of the corporation.
Thank you very much, Chairman and members of the committee. It is my pleasure to be here with members of the Chaguanas Borough Corporation. Chaguanas is a prosperous community that has grown significantly over the years. With a population of over 128,000 persons, the borough of Chaguanas' growth continues in areas of commerce, industry, education institutions, and residential communities. Numerous national and international companies have chosen to base their organization in Chaguanas. This has poised the ever-growing borough to become the next city in Trinidad and Tobago. The Chaguanas Borough Corporation provides a range of services to our burgesses. These services fall under the mandate of local government, include, among others, building inspector and engineering, provision of municipal policing, management and maintenance of parks and sporting facilities, health and sanitation, disaster management, maintenance and management of market and abattoir, provision and support to service and non-profit organization. We continue to work aggressively on our 4 pillars of development, namely safety and security, technology and education, health and the environment, economic development. Our vision is that of a happy people and a happy community by continuing to work and partner with all stakeholders and agencies to create safe and secure communities and improve the quality of life in the borough for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, for your opening statement. Permanent Secretary, I wonder if I could have an opening perspective from you as well.
Good morning all. Destra Bascom, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, with oversight for 14 corporations, of which one is the Chaguanas Borough Corporation. I see this as an opportune moment to learn from experiences of the past, because as the Chair indicated, we're looking at the Auditor General's report on the period 2008 to 2011, a period which the CEO would agree many of us weren't in the current roles we are now. It is also a pleasure to meet with such an experienced committee, to have a meeting of the minds, a brainstorming sessions on how we can improve systems, procedures, and accounting processes within the Borough of Chaguanas in particular, and within the other corporations and the Ministry of Rural Development as a whole. So I really thank you for this opportunity and look forward to a fruitful discussion.
Okay. Thank you very much. I will begin by asking a few questions, and I will then leave it to my colleagues to follow up. The first question I would ask, Mr. Mayor, is what would you say are some of the major accomplishments of the borough within recent times? And I know that you gave a perspective on what you would like to see for Chaguanas, but what are one or two of the things that we can hope to see in the year ahead or in the year or two ahead? So some accomplishments that you can identify and some of the things that you might do to take you in the direction that you outlined.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Over the past years, within the last 4 or 5 years, Chaguanas has aggressively continued in terms of the physical development of the communities in our 8 electoral districts. There are a lot of work that we did and continue to do as it relates to infrastructure, as it relates to recreation facilities. The market refurbishing started at the market, and that is work in progress in terms of our market. We have done a lot of youth development and partnership in youth development. In 2014, we have instituted one of our models to make the community safe and secure, and as safety and security is of paramount importance to all of us in Trinidad and Tobago, we have gotten the community, all the different groups, the business community, interreligious organization, faith-based organization, NGOs, police, municipal police, to put together a team that we meet on a regular basis to get the pulse and get comments and suggestions from Burgesses and those organizations to make sure one is safe and secure. Also, what we have done is that as it relates to the market and vending, it was proposed that the construction of a 4-story complex in Chaguanas to house street vending, and that would have bring a permanent solution to the level of street vending that you have in Chaguanas, and probably that model could have been adopted in the different municipalities throughout the country. That is work in progress. Also, too, at our administrative complex, which is probably the only complex of that kind, that administrative complex in the country. So the environment there that we have there, we came in there in 2014 from our old building. So we have a very good environment that we work in, and we try to provide on a daily basis the best quality service to our businesses. As we speak here today at this meeting, as a pilot project, which is a novelty for local government, is that as a pilot project starting today, our one-stop information desk at our corporation to provide support for all the different areas and the services we provide to businesses. So we continue in terms of all areas of development for the benefit of our businesses in Chaguanas.
Mr. Mayor, you mentioned the issue of vending, and we've seen challenges recently in Port of Spain with the city corporation there. A couple of days ago, we also saw some issues arising in Arima, and I just wondered how you might describe the situation in Chaguanas and the challenges that you might have, and any solutions that you see as being sustainable solutions for the growing town of Chaguanas. I know you mentioned that you had in sight a 4-story building that you wanted to put up to accommodate the vendors, but could you talk a little bit about what is the situation now and how you see a sustainable solution for it? And do you have any current challenges with regard to that?
Well, firstly, Chairman, I'd like to say that our situation might be a bit different from Port of Spain and Arima. In 2014, in 2010, the old Chaguanas health facility was converted into a vendor's mall to provide some level of support for those persons who vend on the street. And in 2014, the council took a decision to remove those vendors, put them in another area, and start construction of a 4-story structure so that you could have 2 stories for vending and 2 for parking, because parking is a challenge in the borough of Chaguanas. At this point in time, as I speak, there is still a court matter as it relates to that, because the vendors didn't want to move. But the present challenge that we face here now is the reorganization of the present Chaguanas market, the structure, because there are a lot of vacant stalls, and for one reason or the other, some of those vendors don't want to go in the stalls. They want to vend in areas just outside of the market. So that whole reorganization process is taking place now, that there are additional stalls that vendors could be relocated there. So it's just an internal arrangement now. We have already did last year the construction of a new roofing system at the market, and there are other works that need to be done, like in terms of electrical, in terms of the security aspect, the refrigeration system in the market. So that is work in progress, and I'm very much optimistic that all that we are doing, we will have a better organization there, and also too that vendors and even persons who shop in the market would have a better environment in terms of conducting their business.
Okay. I realize that in terms of the corporation, there's a kind of separation between what you might call the administrative structure in the corporation and the political directorate, which is governed through a council. And I wonder, I really want to ask some questions about the reports before us, but I wonder if you can explain to me a little bit the relationship between the CEO and the administration that manages the corporation and the role of the elected officials and aldermen governing through a council and how that operates. And this is important. Remember, you have people watching, so they need to understand.
Mr. Chairman, can I do it in two parts? I explain the part from the council aspect and ask the CEO to do the management aspect.
Okay, very good.
In Chaguanas, we have 8 elected representatives representing the 8 electoral district and 4 aldermen that make up a council of 12 persons, which includes the mayor and the deputy mayor. There are 4 standing committees as mandated by the Act 1990, Act 21 of 1990 that we are governed by. We meet on every Tuesday in the month, every Tuesday, with our last Tuesday being that of our coordinating meeting, which we have all the coordinators. And the coordinators are the different agencies that provide services and support to the Chaguanas Borough Corporation and extension, the Burgesses. And on that last Tuesday, we have our statutory meeting where all reports and all that we would have done in committee stage, that we got the final approval there. We make the policies and we set the direction in support of the administration headed by the CEO and in consultation with the CEO and his team as to the plans and programs, both development and recurrent in the borough of Chaguanas.
Okay. And CEO, could you explain a little bit of this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning again to you and the other members. My name is Raymond Zipol, Chief Executive Officer at the Chaguanas Borough Corporation. As the Mayor earlier mentioned, the Chaguanas Borough Corporation is a creature of Act 21 of 1990, which governs all municipalities. The role of the council is basically to formulate policies and to make decisions. The role of the administration is really to implement the lawful resolutions of council. The work of the council and that of the corporation is done through committees of the council. These committees include, well, there are 4 main standing committees of council, which includes public health, physical infrastructure, personnel, and finance. Decisions taken at these committees are ratified at the statutory committee, at the statutory meeting, sorry. It's also important to mention that a very critical committee of the corporation is the Regional Coordinating Committee, where other stakeholders, other state and non-state organizations are present to assist in the overall development of and in this case, the borough. So the role of the administration really, as I indicated before, is to implement the decisions, the lawful decisions of council. And this is done through the chief officers of the council, as is enshrined in Act 21. So we have 5 chief officers, the chief executive officer being one, the financial officer, corporate secretary, engineer and survey officer, as well as the corporate secretary. Right, so these officers would head different departments, and these departments are responsible for implementing the decisions of council.
All right, so the political director is responsible for policy making and the identification of things to be done. So the council is responsible for policy making and the things that are to be done, and you and your public officers are responsible for public administration, implementation, and fiduciary responsibility. Okay. Permanent Secretary, I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit on the question of the role of the Ministry of Rural Development and local government in relation to these corporations, and what is the relationship between the central ministry and these local governments.
Thank you, Chair. The Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government has oversight over the 14 municipal corporations. We also assist them in securing funding from central government, namely the Ministry of Finance. In terms of overview, I would talk a bit about the structure of the corporation. They have responsibility for approving expenditure to a maximum of $300,000. That is the CEO's limit. Any expenditure on a single item above that amount is referred to the ministry at head office under the Special Ministerial Tenders Committee, etc. In terms of oversight, we have meetings with the CEOs on a periodic basis, generally not one-to-one, but all CEOs. We also review their expenditure reports, which are submitted to the Ministry of Finance on an annual basis. Then they have financial reports, and you would notice the document refers to them, which are also submitted. Unaudited and audited reports are submitted to the Ministry of Finance. We are a bit behind in the audited reports, but we are attempting to catch up. We are working closely with each of the corporations to ensure that these financial reports are up to date.
But how far caught up are you? Because we examined in 2011. Where are we now?
They were working on 2012-13.
Okay. These are with the Auditor General, or you're preparing to send?
They're in progress.
They're in progress. So
yes.
They're not yet with the Auditor General?
No.
So when are we going to get to 17? When are completed 17?
See you?
I will not want to venture a guess, but what I am saying to the committee this morning is that because of the gravity of the situation, especially with the corporation coming before the Public Accounts Committee this morning, we all recognize the importance of giving account to the Parliament and the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and this matter, as far as it is possible for me to take action in getting the backlog addressed, it will be given utmost priority.
Okay. So
Chair, if I may add, it is not a challenge for simply Chaguanas Borough Corporation, but each of the corporations. In fact, the matter was raised at a previous PAC meeting 2 months ago when we were looking at disaster management. So we provided a status in terms of where each corporation had reached in submitting their financial reports.
Yeah. What is the problem? Why is there such a backlog? Do you have an idea, or is it just that things have been left to hang, so to speak? I'll ask the Permanent Secretary in terms generally local government, and then you can speak to the Chaguanas Borough. Yeah.
Well, over the years, the corporations have had frequent staff changes, which has resulted in reports, especially detailed reports such as administrative reports and financial reports, being left on the back burner. But we are trying to put them on the front burner now.
Okay, I'd see you.
My response would be similar to that of Permanent Secretary, in that we would have had challenges with staff. The preparation of these reports is the responsibility of qualified accountants. More than likely, financial officers, are such qualified personnel to prepare these reports. But because of the inconsistent presence of financial officers at corporations, this could probably be the reason why we have the backlog. Also, I believe that there may have been some laxity on the part of the corporation not to place a great deal of importance and urgency into getting these documents done. And I, for one, definitely will, as indicated before, will be treating it a lot more seriously.
So you're given the assurance to this committee that you will take sort of leadership responsibility to bring these things up to date?
Yes,
with the
at my corporation.
Yes. Okay, I appreciate that. I think that is good, the volunteerism in it, and also the acceptance and the taking of responsibility. One of the problems you mentioned, the lack of financial officers in the corporation, though. But we have we note from what is available before us that you also have an internal audit problem, or you might say even a kind of deficiency because you don't have the capacity within the corporation. Would you like to say anything about that?
Certainly so, Mr. Chairman. The Audit and Exchequer Act requires the operations of the accounting officer to be supported by an auditing unit. In the case of municipal corporations, possibly with the exception of the Spain Corporation, there are no resident auditing units at regional corporations and at the Chaguanas Borough Corporations. We all recognize the tremendous importance of auditors at a corporation. And we are hopeful, we are optimistic that with the local government reform initiative presently in the pipeline, that this deficiency will be addressed.
Do you now have on your establishment, on the books, room for an internal auditor and members of staff of an internal audit capability?
At present, the organizational structure of the Chaguanas Borough Corporation does not provide for internal auditors. This service is provided by the internal audit team of the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government.
Okay. So can I say that your understanding is that internal audit support and supervision and intervention is to come to the corporation, in your particular case, from the central government, from the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government?
Could you rephrase that?
I just want to get your understanding, because I'm going to ask the PS. Your understanding by what you've said seems to be that the internal audit capability, because you have none on the books now, you don't have any on the establishment, is really meant to come from support from central government through the Ministry of Rural Development and local government, right? That is your understanding. So I just wanted to confirm that. Permanent Secretary, how does that work? Does it work well or not?
I will start with the current state and then get into the future state.
Yeah.
The CEO is correct in his understanding of the function of the audit unit in the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government. Currently, we have very few positions in the ministry because in the public service in general, there's a dearth of suitably qualified persons in the auditing stream. It is difficult to attract and retain suitably qualified persons, and one of the reasons is that several of the positions in ministries are not traveling positions.
Okay.
In the ministry, we currently have 1 auditor 3 on the establishment, 1 auditor 2, 3 auditors 1, and 3 auditing assistants. But not all the positions are filled. One of our auditors 2 retired last year. And this is to deal with 14 corporations, in addition to head office. The future state is that, bearing in mind that local government reform is coming, we drafted a note for Cabinet to create an audit structure to position auditors within each corporation. That note is currently engaging the attention of the PMCD of the Ministry of Public Administration and Communications. In the draft policy on local government reform, it also identifies not only auditing staff within the corporations, but audit committees, because we recognize that there's a dire need for auditors at all levels of the corporation, especially as we will be devolving authority and accountability to the corporations with local government reform. Okay. And they would report directly to the Ministry of Finance on financial matters and the Auditor General's Department on auditing matters.
Okay, would I be correct in saying or drawing the conclusion that there's a structural deficiency in terms of the availability of adequate support for the effective execution of the fiduciary function in the 14 local government institutions which you govern through the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government? And this is not a criticism, it's just an understanding that there is in fact a structural deficiency that stands in the way of that, and you would now have to go to PMCD to create the infrastructure to make adequacy possible.
Yes, Chair, that's a fair assessment.
All right, thank you very much. I'll stop my questions. I will stop my questions at this point, and I'll ask for the next contributor. This is MP Leon.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question in terms of the financial capability. The financial officer is the most senior financial person within the structure, yes?
Technically, yes, but the chief executive officer is also the chief financial officer.
Okay.
But technically, the financial officer is that officer who is suitably qualified and competent to address the financial and fiduciary duties of the corporation.
Okay. This position is what has been changing frequently, correct?
The position is a contract position, and as far as I can remember, the length of contracts will vary between a 2-year and 3-year period. So we would, well, the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government will be responsible for the hiring of the selection process for these officers, as well as the other chief officers. And we have had challenges in the past with people not showing interest for one reason or another. So at present, at the Chaguanas Borough Corporation, we do not have a financial officer. So, you know, this happens from time to time, and as indicated before, could possibly be the reason for the corporations not being up to date with their relevant reports.
Okay. Now, why I asked all of this is because, based on what the PS said, their ability to provide you with proper internal or auditing requirements seems to be limited. And in addition, your accounting officer may be stretched because there's no support with respect to the financial officer, and maybe you also have so many things to do. So I'm assuming that a lot of work is forced upon your accounting officer too, correct?
That is correct. In fact, because of the situation that we are currently encountering, the accounting officer and the CEO has to take up the slack because of the absence of a financial officer, and this is the reality on a day-to-day basis.
My question is, because in your financial documents, a lot of things are missing. So, for example, I just look at the fixed asset register, where there's no information available. And I wanted to ask, not just you, but also in terms of how internal audit, what their recommendations are, because you all said that you are compliant with internal audited recommendations, but those recommendations may be inefficient because of the limited ability to do internal audits. So what is the strategy, one, to have that financial control with the limited resources you have and the recommendations given by the internal audit? What is the strategy for compliance of that?
Let me just back up a little bit. The questions, many of the questions presented to the corporation to respond to would have been submitted by the Auditor General to the corporation some time ago through its management letters. Possibly because of a failure of the corporation then to respond, we are here today to deal with these matters. So you made reference to the asset register. Because we are now very sensitive to this being something that the corporation needs to address and needs to address urgently, we have since started to put things in place so that we can have the asset register done in a manner that is acceptable to the Auditor General.
That is good, but I would like to ask the Auditor General, because it's not just the asset register. So we can't just be reactive to, because we ask the question, say, okay, we're going to look at the asset register now. I'm trying to get a holistic view, and you could guide me, Auditor General. What are some of the main recommendations in terms of control for financial control and management with respect to the financial documents coming out of the corporation? And can we structure something that we can work with, where you would now have a plan going forward in light of the lack of resources provided by the ministry and what you have now?
Remember, that's a very wide question. It's broad, holistic. What I would say is that, firstly, there are so many areas in the financial operations. So, firstly, the regional corporations, such as Chaguanas Borough Corporation, they have to have policies for all areas of their operations, whether it's beyond the income expenditure side. And then they would have procedures which are to be followed, right? And those, well, policies has to be approved by council, and the procedures has to be, well, known to all staff, right? So that's a control. It's a control for all areas of operations, and from that, right, you'd have all records. For example, the fixed assets register. It will have all the procedures on how it's supposed to be maintained and who are responsible. So responsibilities are also placed to officers, right? So there shouldn't be any lapse. So in maintaining the fixed asset register, so those weaknesses could be points to lack of policies and procedures.
No, my question
yes.
is geared specific. Now, there's some level of control because, I mean, a corporation is running, you have a procurement policy, you know, how you procure stuff and how you go about doing the contracts. My question is really geared to the risks based on your report and the main recommendations in terms of the financial oversight, based on your specific recommendations.
if I could put it to the fixed asset register, we got figures being reported on the fixed assets valued at X amount of dollars. It's reported to the stakeholders, but what you're looking at, you look at are those assets really in existence? You're looking at the security, the risk involved there is the possibility there could be loss of the assets. But the fixed asset register is a control where you would ensure, but it will help to ensure that the assets that are valued and reported, it's safeguarded. So the maintenance of that register would help to secure those assets, to ensure that they are complete. All the assets reported are safe, complete. They existed and in good conditions and so on. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
I wanted to get, first of all, a broad view of what are the particular challenges of the Chaguanas Borough Corporation, and what sets you apart then from the other corporations in terms of the kind of issues that they're dealing with. One of the questions was the internal audit, but we sufficiently dealt with that, I think, for this morning. The Mayor.
Can I just start with one issue? It might sound very small, but it have a great impact in terms of business access and services at the corporation, and then the CEO could share some of the other issues. For years, we don't have what we call a cashier, a position as a cashier at the corporation. Based on the financial regulations, there will be a monthly paid officer who will assume that position. And every day, every working day, there are persons who come to access services at the corporation. And when they have cash, if they don't have the links card, they have to go to the bank. And knowing Chaguanas and the challenges we face with the management of traffic, so it's very inconvenient for those persons. And many a times that even they need assistance and some very small issues, but there are fees associated with it. And they have to leave the corporation compound, go to the bank, and then come back with that slip or so. So I think there's a deficiency. It might be small in nature, but it have a great impact in terms of persons and the quality of service. There are many other areas that need to be looked at in terms of a whole reorganization or a whole restructuring, not only the part of the financial aspects of it, but also to other areas. Another quick example, monies that collected from revenue of the corporation, and there are sometimes innovative ways that the corporation could generate that revenue. But then it goes into the consolidated fund, and then we have to reapply for those monies if we have different projects or we need to have any new project. So there's not a great incentive to make things happen as quickly as possible. I mean, with all the checks and balances and all the regulations, but there's not a great incentive to make things happen in a very quick space of time. And most of the times that people want services, and they don't want it tomorrow, they want it today. I don't know if you could elaborate on some of these other things.
I'm sure you, Chair. Just before you move on, Mayor, I just wanted to be clear about what was the real issue in procuring a cashier. What was?
Well, I would like to ask the CEO to answer that, but every time that we as a council would ask that application would have been made to have somebody from the public service to be there, and it's just like, nothing is happening. I'm seeing it in my terms that nothing is happening because nobody is there even up to today. And it is a challenge. And if issues like those or other issues of similar nature could be addressed in terms coming out of this committee, I'm certain that other corporations might suffer the same fate in issues of such nature.
all I can say with respect to this matter is that efforts will have been made to seek to have this officer, the cashier position, made available to the corporation in the past. I have been at the corporation for a little over a year now, and as the mayor indicated, the corporation is trying to make life easier for those that we serve in terms of their fee payments and stuff. So this position is very critical. The thing about it is that Chaguanas Borough Corporation does not have on its establishment the position of cashier. And I didn't come prepared to respond to this question as to what specifically have been the challenges encountered in our liaising with head office, which is the ministry, with respect to securing this position.
Yeah, well, just maybe the PS might help, I don't know, but if the borough is supposed to collect fees and so on, and as is obviously the case, what was supposed to be the mechanism for collecting? I mean, who the people, you know, without the established position of a cashier?
Well, the corporation as CEO, we have to be versatile. We have to use staff and try to observe the provisions of the financial regulations as to which the responsible officers who are given that mandate to collect fees. The thing about it is that and this is where the challenge comes. The cashier position will bring with it certain benefits that the officer who is assigned those duties in a temporary manner would not be able to receive.
No, the mayor mentioned some other issues that the CEO was going to raise about the peculiar challenges at the Chaguanas Borough Corporation.
I think primarily, and this is nothing unique to the Chaguanas Borough Corporation, the issue of funding to really fulfill the mandate of the corporation in providing quality services to our burgesses. We need money. Apart from the provision of services, we are also responsible for ensuring that the organization and its staff is, we introduce capacity building and institutional strengthening. Without money, we cannot do that. People can only become more effective and capable to do these things through training. Then, of course, we have challenges in dealing with succession planning. We have people leaving the corporation, daily rated workers, for example, leaving the corporation through retirement, and having people step up to particularly supervisory and skilled positions is something of a challenge. Again, this requires a certain degree of training and equipping people with necessary skills and competencies. So we see that everything points to, you know, the financial challenge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning again. I wanted to ask a question in relation to the property, plant, and equipment, what you have submitted to the committee thus far. So there is a particular comment from the management letter dated the 4th of November 2015 for the financial year 2011. And the comment was that the fixed assets purchases totaling about $2.4 million were not capitalized and omitted from the financial statements. Now, firstly, I want to ask the Auditor General if this statement is indeed something they want to stand by, and then I want to ask the corporation to respond why these things were omitted.
Yes, member. Your Auditor General will stand by that comment.
Member, I would want to refer this matter to our accountant, to Mrs. Puran, and reminding the committee that the person who will have, or the officer who will have been most appropriate in presenting a response would have been the financial officer. But I will refer it to Ms. Puran.
Mr. Chair, plant and machinery are purchased mainly via our development funds. These would have been recorded there. As to why they were not capitalized, I would be unable to answer at this point in time, as that would have been the function of the financial officer or the accounting person responsible for producing the position statement.
What head did you say it was capitalized under?
No, it was not capitalized according to the Auditor General, but these purchases are made mainly on the development program, and records of these purchases would have been on the development program.
Can the Auditor General comment on that?
Remember, some of these purchases were under what you call the item, on the estimates, other minor equipment. So those would have been assets that had economic useful lives, and they were expense.
So to say that they were omitted is not, so they were accounted for under different head? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, as like an expense then.
Okay,
and not capitalized.
Because there's another
assets.
statement which says that, for example, 6.1 in the management letter that stated that the mayor's Shane,
yes,
which is valued approximately $500,000, was not reflected in the financial statement. So this also is to be said is under a different head?
It would have been purchase and expense, and yes. And the nature of the item is supposed to be a fixed asset. It's fixed assets, yeah.
And okay, so what the PS was alluding to earlier, they're looking at policies and systems to correct this. Now, what is the corporation doing now to correct this system to ensure that we do not have the Auditor General making comments like this is being omitted, and we are actually putting these expenses under the correct areas or like fixed asset spending, so we could account better and we could say, okay, this is where the money has been spent. What have you done?
What I can say is that the Chaguanas Borough Corporation welcomes the presence of auditors, be it the Auditor General's Department or be it the internal auditing unit of the Ministry of Rural Government and Local Government. We welcome their presence because they will point out our deficiencies to us, and I'm speaking in a general sense. They will point out all the deficiencies that exist in our organization so that we can basically learn from our mistakes.
So, Mr. CEO, you have not put anything in place to correct this as to date? Because from what I'm seeing here, we have plant, property, and equipment amounting to about $7 million. So it's not a small amount of money. And then you're having assets like $2 million not accounted for, but it's on a different head. You don't want these things reflected on your audited reports. So what I'm saying is, what systems have you put, or what setup have you done now? Because this is 2015 management letter, we're in 2018. Have you done anything from 2015 to today to say that you're not going to have this issue going forward?
As I indicated earlier, I've only been at the Chaguanas Corporation just since April the 18th last year. Many of these matters that are before us this morning are relatively new to me, and as I would have also indicated, we plan to address them. In moving forward on these issues, I need to be advised, and I need to be advised with the appropriate accounting people that I do not have presently at the corporation.
All right. Well, I'll take that undertaking from you, Mr. CEO. I do have another question in relation to the project management. From the responses, I've learned that you do not have a project management unit, but based on the amounts of the projects, you have had no cost overruns, which is good. But I could not understand the variation in the amounts, and that's what I'm going to ask you for some guidance on this morning. So from the packages, you did submit an appendix with the values of the initial cost and the actual cost, and all of those were quite well. They were either actually the initial cost or a little below. But when you look at the management letter, which is November 2015, there is a significant difference which the actual expenditure. And let's just look at one example, which is the local roads and bridges. Are you all on the same page?
Could you indicate
from your
what?
submission, it would be page 43, right? Local roads and bridges program. And we have the Jonathan Trace South, which has initial cost project of 47,000, and the actual cost was 45,000. You're seeing that? Right. But in the management letter, there's the Jonathan Trace South, which is about $284,000 for actual expenditure. And then we have an actual vote book in 2011 for 45,000. And then the difference is about $239,000. And that's where I want some guidance on.
Member, I am unable to provide that information. It requires some degree of investigation. I am asking the committee if I can present this information in writing at a subsequent time.
Does the Auditor General want to share anything on that, since this is from the management letter?
I think what the member is asking is what was the nature of the concern
Yes.
by the Auditor General's
Right.
office, and secondly, what response did they require?
Okay. It's simply that a figure was reported in the financial statement. You would have a subschedule, the makeup of the figure reported on the statement of position / balance sheet. And the supporting schedule would have had the figure for the Jonathan Trace. But however, these figures reported in the financial statements has to agree to the main books and records, which was, in this case, not a general ledger, but a vote book, and the vote book had a difference. So that was the query. Yeah. Yeah.
But you are saying you are not able to explain it without looking into the matter and trying to find out.
That's correct, Chairman.
All right, and that is because you have assumed office within the last year, and perhaps this is a little way back. Is that it?
Not just that we have quite a lot of data presented here. Several projects are indicated in our report, and had I been aware that this particular issue would have been raised this morning, I would have come prepared. So I do not want to make any premature statement on the matter without, looking more closely at what may have happened.
Okay, but remember, these are your documents, in a way. So, I mean, in that sense, you are prepared for any question on anything. But we do take the point that we will get something in writing from you in response to Senator Ramkissoon's question on this particular matter. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And one more question in relation to your Appendix 6, which deals with your projects and your programs. I would like an idea of how these projects or programs come about. How does this list present itself? Is it every year well, I don't know how you'll do it, if every quarterly, every year, how do you compile a list of projects, because there's a number of drainage projects, road projects. How is it that the corporation, because you don't have a project unit, right? So how it is established?
Appendix 6 deals with the PSIP program, or to use another term, the development program. Funds are allocated to carry out this particular program on an annual basis. When the Ministry of Finance will allocate funds towards the Chaguanas Corporation for this particular purpose, it is the responsibility of the council to identify and subsequently approve projects to be done under the development program. Once this is done, it is the paperwork follows, meaning that the detailed estimates are prepared and funds are applied for from the Budget Division of Ministry of Finance through the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, so that these projects can be implemented. The different categories of projects that we are seeing here on this appendix would be basically line item projects, which would deal with different areas: drainage and irrigation, roads and bridges, markets, recreational facilities, etc. So this in a nutshell is how it is done. The absence of a project unit at the corporation has not been a handicap, as indicated in the report. The corporation has a team of very committed, diligent officers that are responsible for ensuring that these projects are done in an efficient, effective, cost-effective manner, and that we have not encountered any serious challenges, at least not while I have been there, in terms of executing the projects under the development program.
Thank you, Mr. CU. In relation to your projects, that's very good that you all have not had any issues. But my concern is that you're leaving it until your councillors to determine. You have about 17 box drains that you have looked at in 2011. Now, is it in 2013 these same box drains are now going to come up on your list to be repaired? And I don't know if the corporation tracks these things to see how often you repair a trace or a road, or how well the construction work is being done. And that deals with your quality of work and not only your costs. Because we didn't look at the time the project actually takes to be completed, because that also is another part of a project you have to look at. But we're just looking at dollars and cents here. And is it that we are getting the quality of work? And I'm not seeing anywhere that we would be tracking it, or any unit that would be saying that, hey, we looked at, for example, I brought up Johnson Trace earlier. We looked at Johnson Trace in 2011. We may have to look at this in 2015 or 2020. Do we have any system like that in the corporation?
Yes, we do. And let me just indicate that there is a number of checks and balances, and there is stringent oversight over this particular program. For example, I would have alluded to the fact that we would have to prepare detailed estimates for each project. These estimates, when sent to the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government, would have to be inspected by officers from that ministry to ensure that there is proper justification for the allocation of monies towards these projects, so that there is absolutely no possibility of duplication or any form of wrongdoing or anything like that. When funds are released and when contracts are awarded and when these projects are implemented, there is considerable supervision to ensure quality control and value for money. Also providing some degree of vigilance over these projects, for want of a better term, would be the local government representatives, the councillors. They will also ensure that the work that is being done in their communities are in order. And before any monies are paid for these works, council will have to approve payment. So there are, in fact, several measures that are observed to ensure that the taxpayers' money is properly spent.
Good day, thank you, Chair. So I have two questions. One is for the Ministry regarding the submissions pertaining to local government reform, and the second is for the Borough Corporation regarding the releases and if it has affected any of the services you provide for burgesses. So the first question to the Ministry is, has the concept of fiscal federalism been taken into account, given the lamentations of the mayor today that a lot of the revenue collected goes into the consolidated fund? Fiscal federalism basically means you have ability to tax at source or collect fees at source, and also you have access to the fees. So it doesn't have to go into this one pool at central government. Has this paradigm shift been proposed in any form or fashion?
You're asking a question which may be a bit above my pay grade, but I'll attempt to answer. In the draft policy on local government reform, it was envisaged that property tax, which is collected, would be retained by the corporation. But I know that the Property Tax Act is currently being debated, and we await the outcome of the decision in terms of where the property tax ends up, whether it's in the consolidated fund managed by the Ministry of Finance or in each regional corporation.
And beyond property tax, because I'm seeing income here in as far back as 2010 being $2.9 million. And if these funds from all the corporations go back to the consolidated fund, then they don't have access to them at the local level. Is it that proposals for these other types of income will be situated at they'll have access to it at the local level?
We haven't examined other sources of funding as yet.
Thank you very much. The other question for the regional corporation, given the issues that many corporations have had with releases, does it affect your ability to service requests from burgesses? And particularly, if a burgess requires an assistance regarding tree removal, land clearance, retaining walls, I'm not sure if I have much retaining wall requests from Chaguanas Borough itself, but that type of thing, does the Borough Corporation assist? That is the first question. And the second question is, how many such requests have been fulfilled on an annual basis?
I will just do one part again, and the will do the other. But from October 1st to the ending of April, we have an estimated shortfall of close to $20 million. As it relates to our monthly subventions, for example, if we request $9.5 million, we'll get 4.8, 5.3. And that to have a great effect as it relates to our day-to-day operation in the corporation. See you.
In specifically responding to the question which relates to meeting the needs of burgesses for infrastructural work and other related works. I think the mayor's response was more or less implying that without money we are seriously restricted in providing burgesses with the services that they so desperately need. However, I just wanted to point out that the corporation is responsible for the maintenance of secondary roads, minor water courses, for certain public buildings at present, like markets, recreational facilities, and such like. So we are responsible for those. So even before burgesses will identify needs in those areas, the corporation is responsible for maintaining these facilities through its recurrent program, through recurrent funds, right? Whenever unusual or irregular requests would be brought to the corporation, the council will deliberate on them and decide whether the corporation should honor these requests. So from my recollection, you pointed out cutting of trees, etc. Yes, the corporation does that sort of thing, providing that it is warranted, it is posing a threat, that we're not doing the work or carry out the responsibility of private residents, which should come at their expense. So these things are deliberated upon by the council, and a decision is made based on these considerations.
Based on what the Permanent Secretary had said earlier, and with regard to the whole business of devolution and decentralization for local government, is that on the agenda in terms, I know it's part of policy, but is that on the agenda in terms of governmental action? I'm asking the PS.
It is definitely on the agenda.
Okay, for action. You have any?
I would like to point out that reform will happen incrementally. In fact, I was reading a 2004 document on reform, and it mentioned that reform could take up to 10 years to be fully operationalized. In fact, numerous governments over the past 40 years have been attempting reform. And I think this is the furthest we have reached in that we have a cabinet-approved draft policy. But as a population, I'd like our citizens to bear in mind that it will happen incrementally, but it will happen.
Okay, what would full devolution and decentralization do to the need of the Ministry of Local Government to continue to function?
With full devolution, the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government will be the Ministry of Rural Development alone, because the local government aspect will be managed at the local level.
Okay. So the concept requires really a significant amount of autonomy, incrementally given over time,
yes,
to the local government
definitely
institutions. Okay. Thank you very much. Do members have any other questions?
I wanted to have a follow-up regarding
yes,
that. Fundamental to development of local economies in Trinidad and Tobago is this whole concept of having access to the funds generated. So it will actually give you more incentive to generate more funds. Has the Borough Corporation suggested any mechanism by which that can be promoted? In terms of this, the whole concept of decentralization of the revenue management of the country. Or you have any ideas regarding that?
When this whole conversation about local government reform came to the fore again under the current administration. Understanding that central government was now seriously considering devolving of powers to municipal corporations. I, for one, started to adopt this mindset as to how we can raise revenue on our own without solely depending on government subventions. So this is something that we are constantly looking at. We have, in the past, initiated, not much, a couple in partnerships. One is the management of the Chaguanas Market Car Park, partnering with NIPTEC, and that facility is resulting in the corporation receiving a sizable amount of revenue on a monthly basis. We are now...
Sorry to interrupt. Could you state how much revenue annually you expect to generate?
Well, monthly it would be somewhere in the vicinity of $60,000 a month, right? So looking at the options that may be available to us, we are constantly on the lookout for ways and means to raise our own funds. We have facilities, for example, in market that are currently being used and where people will have to pay for their stalls, etc. But we are also conscious of the current economic times in which we live. So, we have to ensure that there's a proper balance in terms of how we move forward in these areas. So this is all I can say at this point in time. We have a few ideas. I don't know if the mayor would want to contribute to this response.
Yes, Chairman. As you indicated in terms of the market, and we're very conscious of the fact that, for example, again, those vendors pay like $5 a day to use to sell in the market. And some of those fees that we have are very small fees, but it's much more support to the community, to the purchasers and the residents. But I would like to, based on the question that you asked, and some of the way forward in terms of the monetary aspect. And one of the things that we have great challenge with in Chaguanas, and I think other corporations may have the same thing, is that town and country planning building inspectorate department as it relates to local government. And the example I will put forward is that stymies development when the process is slow and it stymies development, in our case in the borough of Chaguanas. And just to briefly chat, because somebody needs to build a house, you draw your plans, you send it to town and country planning department, who will approve it and send it to the corporation, who in turn send it to the Ministry of Health, County Medical Officer of Health Department. And the corporations have the corporation itself have no input in that. So those public health inspectors, they do their aspect of it. And so the client itself, the homeowner, there's a grave difficulty now in terms of tracking where those plans are. Then the county medical officer will send back to the corporation, who in turn will go. So it's a whole long system that is not supportive of the person and not supportive in terms of the local economies. And I think that there was a planning and facilitation bill, and if in the region, so when we talk about the local government reform, if one of the areas that it could be as a pilot in the different regions, in the case of Chaguanas, 3 years ago, we have identified space to ask town and country. We wrote several letters asking if they could have a presence in Chaguanas to help to fast track that arrangement. So from the time that you get your approval from town and country, sometimes it takes 3 months, 6 months, it could even be more if there are different challenges with it. And that creates grave distress for persons who want to build, who want to expand their businesses, who companies want to come into Chaguanas in terms of commercial, small, medium, or large. And I think that is one of a very grave area that we need and this committee, I'm just bringing forward to this committee, that they need to look at and some kind of recommendation made how we could move that process forward.
The law is for that even without the new law having to do with decentralization and devolution of power to local government. As you say, the Planning and Facilitation of Development Bill exists, and the integration of town and country planning functions and local government functions can easily be achieved if those institutions are brought together in a devolved way across 14 corporations in the country. It has already been achieved for the House of Assembly under the same law, and it can also be done for local government across the country. So that is something that is achievable, and I know it's doable, and it would certainly advance the cause of decentralization and devolution of power. MP Leons, you had something to ask.
Yeah, just one quick question. I looked at one of your responses under projects, which stated there were some challenges in terms of having to pay protection money or persons wanting to demand protection money, which would have caused some of the projects you had planned to not go ahead or stop, which would mean monies that would have been accounted for to spend on projects would not have been spent. What are some of the strategies you're implementing or have implemented or going to implement to mitigate against things like that? Right? I will give you an example. A lot of times some of these things happen. Sometimes the community doesn't feel involved in projects. Sometimes simple communication with persons within the community, you know, or even encouraging contractors from within the community to do the work. What are some of the strategies you all have, will, or plan to implement to mitigate against this?
Well, you have actually answered your own question, because the incident that we're referring to occurred last year on one of our job sites. The contractor that was hired to carry out that particular project, he was accosted. He was physically assaulted for the mere reason that he was not, you know, coming up to the demands of these individuals. Now, we try to encourage contractors who would do work for the corporation that they should try as much as possible to employ people from the various communities, right? And I am pretty certain that they do. In this particular instance, the same was true, where some of the same individuals who were applying pressure, they were employed, and from my information, they were handsomely paid to do work for the contractor. That apparently was not sufficient, so they resorted to take a different approach. What we try to do in Chaguanas, and I say we, making reference specifically to the councillors for the different areas, these works are being done in communities for members of the community, for their benefit, to improve the quality of life that they enjoy. And I know for a fact that the councillors of the Chaguanas Borough Corporation, they make it their business to follow up on these projects, as I will have said earlier, and to ensure that the members of the community get the kind of service that they expect from the corporation. I know that they are where we may have challenges with people who may have criminal tendencies, etc. These councillors, being familiar with many of these individuals, speak to them. They would placate and try to get their support, try to talk them out of potential violent situations on job sites. So they play a very important role. But the fact of the matter is that there are some, in my humble view, that who, seem bent on being aggressive and violent.
Right, understand what you're saying. If all those strategies have been implemented in terms of employing persons from the community, bringing, encouraging contractors from within the community, and you're still having those challenges, what then is the strategy? Have you made some partnership with maybe the police force, or what then is the strategy? Because the reason why I'm asking this is because the corporation is there to serve the communities, right? And there may be a few that may be doing this, because what you said to me is one incident. So I don't see it as something that has plagued the operation. So for those one or two incidents, what is the strategy to ensure the community benefits from the service?
Well, the thing about it is that the police, they have challenges with their own resources. The corporation, where there's the resident municipal police, we also have challenges. Remember, this kind of incident is something that we have to address 24/7. It's not to say that the police will monitor job sites, right? Because anything can happen. After giving it a lot of thought and after having discussions with colleagues, the only workable solution would have to cater for paid security on these job sites for as long as the project is ongoing. And this, of course, will take away from the project itself in terms of value for money. This is the only thing we can come up with at this point in time.
Okay, we'll move on now to Senator Ramkisoon.
Yes, a quick question.
Please be crisp in your answer. We're going to try and close up now at this point. Okay.
From your responses,
You had a follow-up?
You have said that the corporation has an emergency operations plan. And I would like to know when last this was reviewed or even revised, and considering that the corporation has a vacant position of the disaster management coordinator, who now is responsible for this emergency operations plan? So that's 3 questions there.
Okay, I will answer the last one first. Our interim head of the disaster management unit is our engineer, Mr. Ogoma. He is basically providing guidance to other members of that team. The response pertinent to the Emergency Operations Center, I would like to refer that to a member of the MU, Mr. Bidesi.
As to the actual activation of the Emergency Operations Center, it's activated when we have an emergency that is large scale that would, warrant the activation of the Emergency Operations Center. The last time we had a full-scale activation was probably during the Tropical Storm Brett.
Do you have a plan, an emergency operations plan?
Yes, we do have an emergency operations plan that is reviewed on an annual basis.
And that was developed when?
It was first developed around 2008 when the unit went into existence.
2011, and every year they have plan drills, or how is it?
The plan is essentially a live plan, so it's updated. There are changes in terms of staff members, and even the plan is always evolving also in terms of the function of the unit.
Any members of the community are aware of this?
It's an internal operations plan, so it's not really essentially shared with the community.
All right, there is, in addition to the questions asked here, a committee that's focused on disaster management and preparedness. So we will await the report of that committee because it also includes the local government system under its jurisdiction. Okay, I want to take the opportunity to thank everybody for their contributions here today. Members of my committee, both present now and present at the start of the meeting. I also want to thank the chairman of the corporation and the CEO and the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government and your entire staff for being present, first of all, and secondly, for contributing freely and answering the questions. I want to also thank the Auditor Generals, the acting Deputy Auditor General, and members of his staff for being here present and participating also when necessary during the course of the events. Of the questions. I also want to thank the media and members of the public who are here present. But as I close, I do want to say that we are concerned about the audit reports that we've seen up to 2011. And the reason we did not pursue them in any grave and great detail is because of the two issues that came up here. First of all, the problems of staff and staffing that you have in this area, not just the changes, but the infrastructure of support in the corporation, first of all, and secondly, the structural problem that the permanent secretary agreed was an issue in terms of managing these things. But we are not happy with the report, and we are not happy with the fact that you do not have your audited reports up to date with the Auditor General. You said, CEO, two things which were very encouraging. One is that you will use this opportunity and this experience to learn and to improve. And secondly, you actively volunteered to take responsibility for bringing these matters to up to date. That is to say, the audit reports. So we will hold you to that. If there are any additional questions that we want to ask you, the secretary to the committee will convey those questions to you and ask you to respond to us. But in the meantime, we want to express our concern. Secondly, we want to encourage you to learn from this experience. And thirdly, we want you to produce the audited reports up to mark and have them produced and to bring them up to date for the Auditor General's office so that we could get at least this one cooperation in a way that is satisfying to the general public. Because fiduciary responsibilities are important and you don't want to ignore them. From this committee, we will send to you a list of things that we feel that should be actioned, all right, including bringing those audited reports up to date. Secondly, we will send to the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government a list of things that we feel might be usefully addressed. And we will recommend that we proceed as a country and as a governance model with the devolution of power to local government, taking into account that there are many structural deficiencies now which must be corrected if we are to make that reasonable. And secondly, that there is a issue of accountability and checks and balances which must be taken into account in the devolution and decentralization process, and catered for in terms of the human resource capability and the structuring of responsibilities for accountability in the system. So I want to thank you all, and I thank the members of my committee too, who so ably represented the people by asking questions that came up during these, within these documents and outside of the documents. So thank you again, and we wish the corporation and the ministry good luck.